How God's love restarts your story, even if you don't see the solution to your problem. There are moments when your heart whispers, "It's over." When everything you tried to hold together seems to fall apart in your hands. You look around, searching for something that still feels safe, but nothing does. And inside you begin to wonder if maybe God has gone silent, if maybe your story has reached its final page. But what you call the end is where God's love begins to move. Not in noise, not in signs, not in explanations, but in a quiet, holy rebuilding of what your eyes can't yet see. The truth is, God doesn't need you to understand the way forward. He only needs your heart to stay open. Because even when you see no solution, His love is already rewriting what you thought was lost. Everything that fell apart is being rearranged with purpose. Every unanswered prayer is still being heard. And today, right here in this very moment, God's love is reaching into the places that broke you, not to fix what once was, but to restart your story from a place where only grace can begin. When everything you planned starts to fall apart. There are moments in life when the ground beneath you begins to tremble, and no matter how hard you try to hold on, everything starts slipping through your fingers. You look around, searching for something familiar, but even the walls that once protected you seem to be collapsing. You whisper to God, asking why things turn this way, why the dreams you prayed for so deeply are now falling apart piece by piece. Yet all you hear is silence, a silence so heavy that it echoes louder than any storm. You remember how sure you once were, how you believed you had understood His plans. You had everything mapped out, the path, the people, the moments where you thought His promises would bloom. But now, those same promises seem like distant shadows, and your heart begins to question if you misunderstood His voice. You thought His love would mean clarity, but now you stand in a fog so thick that every step feels uncertain. And still, somewhere in that confusion, something sacred is quietly unfolding. What you see as the breaking of your world, heaven sees as the beginning of your transformation. God's love is not absent in this chaos. It's hidden within it. It's in the way your tears soften your heart, in the way your weakness makes room for His strength. You think you're losing everything, but you're being stripped only of what cannot follow you into the next chapter. Every shattered plan, every unanswered prayer, every goodbye that tore your soul apart, they are not proof of abandonment, but preparation for resurrection. Sometimes God allows what you built to fall apart because He knows that if it stayed standing, it would keep you small. He knows how much you cling to the familiar, how terrified you are of losing what you think defines you. So He lets it crumble, not to punish you, but to free you. You cry out, "Lord, I can't handle this anymore." And in that very cry, His love begins to move. Because when you reach the end of yourself, that's when His grace finds space to begin. It may not look like healing yet. It may still hurt too much to believe anything good could rise from this. But the potter does his deepest work in the quiet of broken clay. And though you can't see it, He's reshaping what you thought was ruined. Every piece that fell is being touched by His mercy. Every corner of your story is being rewritten with tenderness. He's not rebuilding what you lost. He's building something entirely new. The truth is, you don't need to understand the path to be guided by it. You only need to trust that God's love knows the way when you don't. So, let the old things fall. Let the old versions of yourself rest. What breaks in your hands is being held in His. What feels like loss is only the turning of a page. And when the dust finally settles, you'll see what He was doing all along. You'll realize that what felt like an ending was simply the moment God's love restarted your story. When the answers don't come. You've prayed until your voice grew tired. You've whispered your pain into the night, hoping that somehow heaven would respond. But all you've met is silence. Days turn into weeks, and still, no sign, no miracle, no change. You start wondering if maybe God has turned away, if maybe your prayers are too small, too ordinary to be noticed. But what you cannot see is that His silence is not the absence of love. It's the language of preparation. When you ask, "Why, Lord? Why can't I see anything changing?" Heaven answers not in words, but in timing. Because love that comes from God does not rush. It builds slowly, like dawn breaking over a restless sea. He is not ignoring you. He is preparing you to receive what you prayed for in a way that won't destroy you. Sometimes the delay is mercy, the waiting, protection, the unanswered prayer, a shield against what your eyes can't yet discern. There are moments when God's love hides you instead of showing you. It feels like abandonment, but it's actually His hand covering you, keeping you from paths that would have broken you again. He sees the traps your heart can't see. He knows the dangers behind doors you still call opportunities. And while you cry, "Why are you silent?" His love whispers back, "Because I'm building something that needs time to become strong enough to last." In the silence, your faith is being purified. The noise inside you and the panic, the fear, the need for immediate answers is being quieted so you can finally hear what never needed to be said aloud. God is teaching you that His love is not a performance to be proven, but a presence to be trusted. You don't have to feel it for it to be real. You don't have to see it for it to be working. The truth is, if you could see everything, you would never need faith. And if you never needed faith, you would never truly know the depth of His love. So He hides what He's doing, not to confuse you, but to draw you closer. Every unanswered question is an invitation to trust. Every delay is a doorway into deeper surrender. God's love is not measured by how quickly He fixes your pain, but by how patiently He walks with you through it. When the answers don't come, it's not because He doesn't care. It's because He's answering in a higher way. He's answering in whispers that shape your heart instead of your circumstances. He's answering in strength you didn't know you were gaining, in peace that grows in the dark, in wisdom born from waiting. So don't rush the silence, don't despise the stillness, let it do its holy work. Because when the time comes and He begins to move, you'll understand why He took so long. You'll look back and see that the silence wasn't punishment. It was the womb of your rebirth. And through every unseen hour, God's love was not distant. It was closer than your breath, rewriting your story in ways only eternity could explain. When God begins to move in ways you cannot see, there comes a moment when, after so much silence, something begins to shift. Not around you, but within you. It's not a miracle you can post about, not a sudden door that opens. It's quieter than that. It's a whisper that rises in your chest, a strange peace that doesn't make sense given everything you've lost. You can't explain it, but somewhere deep inside, you start to feel that maybe, just maybe, God has been moving all along. It starts subtly. You wake up one morning and the weight on your chest feels a little lighter. The tears that used to fall without warning begin to dry before reaching your chin. You start noticing small things again. The light through the window, the sound of rain, the heartbeat of the world that you had forgotten in your sorrow. You don't know why, but the ache begins to soften. That's not coincidence. That's God's love, gently returning to the surface of your life. He's been working underneath your understanding, aligning hearts, moving situations, creating opportunities that your eyes can't yet recognize. You think nothing is happening, but heaven is rearranging everything in silence. Every time you said nothing is changing, He whispered, "I'm changing you first." Because before He restores what was lost, He restores the one who lost it. God's love doesn't always come as rescue. Sometimes it comes as revelation. It shows you that the miracle was never the thing you wanted back, but the strength that grew in you when it was gone. You learn to stop asking, "When will this end?" and start saying, "Lord, keep working, even if I can't see it." That is faith in its purest form. Not the belief that everything will happen quickly, but the quiet confidence that nothing is wasted in His hands. The truth is, God begins most of His miracles in places no one looks. In hidden hearts, in late nights when no one sees you praying, in decisions that seem insignificant but carry eternal weight. He works behind the scenes, like a writer crafting chapters you'll only understand later. You may think you're standing still, but in heaven's timeline, you're already walking toward restoration. And while you wait, He is untangling the knots of your past, redeeming every wrong turn, and turning your story into something only grace could compose. The relationships that ended, the jobs that failed, the dreams that vanished, they are not the ruins of your life, they are the soil of your resurrection. From what you thought was over, He's planting something that will never die. So when you feel nothing, believe everything. When you can't trace His hand, trust His heart. Because God's love is not defined by what you see, but by what He's silently creating in the unseen. And one day, when you least expect it, light will pour through the cracks, and you'll realize that the entire time you thought you were waiting for God, He was actually waiting for you to believe again. When God's love begins to rebuild what was broken, there comes a quiet moment when something inside you begins to rise again. It doesn't arrive with noise or celebration. It comes like dawn after a long night, slow, hesitant, but unstoppable. You can't explain it, but the ache that once defined your every breath starts to fade, replaced by a strange peace you didn't create. You realize that what's healing you isn't time, it's God's love, rebuilding the places that pain had ruined. You thought that restoration would come through something visible, a door reopening, a person returning, a miracle that everyone could see. But God's love doesn't rebuild from the outside in. It starts deep within your soul where no one else can reach. He begins to rearrange your thoughts, to replace fear with trust, to transform grief into gratitude. He touches the cracks in your heart not to erase them, but to fill them with His light. Because every scar that once made you feel unworthy becomes proof of where His hands have healed you. There were nights when you believed you'd never smile again, mornings when getting out of bed felt like an act of survival. But here you are, breathing differently. You may not have noticed it, but strength has been returning to your spirit like a tide rising quietly beneath the surface. What you once called broken, God is calling rebuilt. And though it doesn't look the same as before, that's the miracle. It's not supposed to. You are not the person who fell apart. You are becoming the one who is reborn from the ruins. You no longer chase what left, you cherish what stayed. You no longer beg for understanding, you rest in divine mystery. That is what God's love does. It replaces the frantic search for answers with the calm assurance that you were never abandoned, only reshaped. Sometimes what God restores is not what you lost, but who you are. He takes the shattered identity you carried, the one built from fear, from approval, from disappointments, and replaces it with the truth. You are loved, even in the middle of your unfinished story. He doesn't need your perfection to begin again. He only needs your permission to heal. And as His presence fills the spaces that once felt empty, you begin to see beauty in what once broke you. You start to understand that every delay was protection, every silence was grace, every heartbreak was an invitation to rediscover His strength within you. What once felt like a punishment now looks like preparation. That's how God rebuilds, not by giving you back what was lost, but by showing you that what you truly needed could never be taken away. His peace, His mercy, His unshakable love, those are the pillars of your new beginning. And when you look at your life now, even with its scars, you realize something holy. You didn't rebuild yourself. God's love rebuilt you. When you understand why it took so long, there's a sacred clarity that comes only after the storm. It doesn't arrive when you're begging for answers, but when your heart finally grows quiet enough to listen. You begin to see that the long nights, the unanswered prayers, the painful waiting, none of it was wasted. Every delay had a purpose. Every silence was love in disguise. And though you once cried out, "Why is this taking so long?" now you can whisper, "Thank you, Lord, for not giving it to me before I was ready." In the waiting, you were learning to let go of control. You were learning that not every closed door was rejection, some were redirection. You were learning that the things you thought were lost forever had to be released so that something eternal could take their place. God was not punishing you. He was preparing you. Because God's love never withholds what is rightfully yours. It simply waits until you are strong enough to hold it without losing yourself again. You see? If He had answered when you demanded, you would have built your future on impatience, not faith. You would have taken His blessings as replacements for His presence. So He allowed time to become your teacher. He let the silence carve humility into your spirit, and the stillness teach you how to breathe again. You thought the delay was killing you, but it was saving you from a version of yourself that couldn't carry what you were praying for. Now you understand that the road wasn't longer than it needed to be. It was perfectly measured for your transformation. The tears that fell were not signs of weakness but water for the seeds He was planting in your soul. You had to lose your sense of control so that you could gain a deeper sense of trust. You had to walk through emptiness to recognize fullness when it came. The pain was never punishment. It was purification. Every season you thought was wasted was actually shaping your capacity for gratitude. Every prayer that went unanswered was an invitation to deeper faith. God's love knew exactly when to reveal what your spirit could handle. He doesn't rush restoration, because true healing isn't instant. It's sacred. And now as you look back, you realize that the time you spent waiting wasn't time lost. It was the soil of your becoming. There's beauty in the slowness of God. He never forgets what He promised. He simply fulfills it at the moment it will carry the most meaning. What felt like abandonment was divine timing, and what seemed like silence was God whispering, "Hold on a little longer. I'm still writing." And now you see? The story He's been writing was never about what you were waiting to receive. It was about who you were becoming while you waited. You were learning patience, compassion, surrender, the language of heaven spoken through human pain. And one day, when you walk into the blessings that once felt delayed, you'll smile through tears and say, "It was worth it. Every minute, every tear, every silence. Because now I know the heart of the one who waited with me." And when faith becomes stronger than fear, there comes a moment when your heart stops asking when and begins to whisper, "I trust you." It doesn't mean you understand everything. It simply means that somewhere along the journey, faith became heavier than fear. You stop needing proof and start breathing in peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from knowing the outcome, but from knowing the one who holds it. This is the quiet strength that grows in people who have walked through the dark and realized they were never truly alone. You remember the nights you cried until your voice broke, the mornings you questioned your worth, the days when even prayer felt empty, and yet through it all something unseen carried you. That something was God's love, steady, patient, and unshaken by your doubts. Fear once dictated your every step. It told you that if you couldn't see the way, you were lost. It convinced you that your mistakes had disqualified you from grace. But God was never measuring your worth by perfection. He was shaping your soul through perseverance. He allowed your fear to speak so that your faith could learn how to answer. And now, when fear tries to return, it no longer finds a home inside you. It only finds echoes of trust. You've learned that courage is not the absence of trembling. It's walking forward while trembling. You've learned that believing doesn't always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like whispering, "I still believe," with tears in your eyes. And every time you did, heaven listened. Every time you stood when you could have fallen, God's love smiled through the silence, proud of the strength that was being born in you. Faith is not a feeling. It's a choice to stay. To stay in prayer when you hear no answer. To stay in peace when everything around you screams chaos. To stay in hope when all you have left are ashes. That's the kind of faith that shakes hell and opens heaven. And it's the kind that God has been building in you all along. You once begged Him to remove your fear. Instead, He taught you how to walk with it and still move forward. He didn't promise the absence of storms. He promised His presence in them. And now, when you face uncertainty, you remember the history you have with His faithfulness. You remember that every time you fell, His hands were already waiting. You remember that every ending led to a beginning you didn't see coming. That's what maturity in the spirit feels like. Calm in the middle of confusion. Peace that doesn't depend on clarity. It's understanding that the mountain doesn't move until your heart does. It's realizing that God's love was never about preventing pain, but transforming it into purpose. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the fear that once terrified you became the soil where faith was planted. It was never about being fearless. It was about being faithful. Because those who have walked through the valley and still whisper, "God, I trust you," are the ones who truly know His heart. And that is where your new story begins. Not in what you see, but in what you finally believe. When peace becomes your new language. There comes a day when the storms outside no longer control the weather within you. The same problems may still exist. The same uncertainties may still stand before you. But something in your soul has changed. The panic that once ruled your chest has been replaced by a gentle calm. You no longer fight what you don't understand. You rest in the one who does. This is what it means when God's love becomes your peace. Peace doesn't arrive as an event. It grows like morning light, slow, certain, undeniable. You stop waiting for everything to be perfect before you breathe again. You stop measuring God's presence by the absence of pain. You start to realize that even when the waves rise, the one who commands them is in your boat. And for the first time in a long time, you're not afraid to close your eyes and rest. You've spent so much of your life fighting battles that weren't yours to fight, trying to fix, to prove, to hold together what God was asking you to release. But the moment you laid it all down, the moment you whispered, "Lord, I'm done trying to carry what belongs to you," something sacred happened. Heaven exhaled, the pressure lifted, and peace, that mysterious gift that surpasses understanding, began to flood your soul like a quiet river after years of drought. God's love was never trying to make you stronger by adding more weight. It was trying to make you free by teaching you surrender. Because peace isn't found in control. It's found in trust. You start to understand that your role was never to figure everything out, but to walk with the one who already has. You don't need all the answers when you know the heart of the author. Sometimes peace is simply choosing silence over reaction. It's seeing chaos and deciding not to let it live inside you. It's hearing the enemy's lies and responding, "I already know who holds my story." This peace doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence. The presence of a God who has been faithful in every chapter, even the ones you didn't understand. There is a holiness and stillness that you never knew before. You can sit in the same place where you once wept and feel grateful now. You can revisit memories that used to wound you and find healing instead. That's not time doing its work. That's God's love doing His. He has replaced panic with perspective, tears with wisdom, fear with faith. And now you don't rush anymore. You move slower, speak softer, forgive quicker. You understand that peace is not the end of the journey. It's the evidence that you've been walking with Him all along. It's the fruit of trust, the echo of grace, the melody of a soul finally in tune with heaven. So breathe. You've made it to a place many never find, not because life became easier, but because you let love become stronger. And as you rest in this new silence, you'll feel it deep within. This is what home feels like. Not the absence of storms, but the certainty that God's love will always bring you safely through them. When God gives you new eyes to see your life, after peace comes something even more sacred. Vision. Not the kind that looks at circumstances, but the kind that looks through them. It's as if God wipes away the fog that once covered your heart, and suddenly you see everything differently. The same world, the same past, the same story. But now through the light of His love. You realize He was never trying to destroy you. He was trying to awaken you. And in that awakening, you begin to understand why some things had to fall apart before they could ever make sense. You start noticing how His fingerprints were everywhere. In every loss, every delay, every closed door. What once looked like failure now feels like divine choreography. The friendships that ended taught you boundaries. The dreams that collapsed taught you humility. The waiting taught you faith. You begin to see that everything that left your life was making room for what your soul truly needed. This is not luck. This is God's love, designing your story with precision that only eternity could understand. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead, you start whispering, "Thank you for not giving me what I thought I wanted," because now you can see the detours were protection, the heartbreak was redirection, the delay was preparation. What once looked like loss was God planting new beginnings in the soil of surrender. He opens your eyes to beauty you had stopped noticing. You see grace in the smallest details. A sunrise after a sleepless night, laughter returning where tears once lived, the strength you now carry quietly. You begin to understand that miracles are not always loud. Sometimes they look like peace after years of chaos or courage when fear should have won. You realize that God's greatest miracles are not around you. They are within you. God's love changes the way you see everything. You stop labeling seasons as good or bad. You start calling them all holy. You understand that even pain carries a purpose when placed in His hands. You stop searching for meaning and start living from it. You no longer fear the unknown because you trust the one who already walked ahead of you. This is what divine clarity feels like. Not certainty about the path, but confidence in the presence that walks beside you. And as your vision clears, you begin to see people differently too. You forgive those who hurt you not because they deserve it, but because you're finally free. You bless those who left, not because it didn't hurt, but because you now see they were part of your refining. You stop clinging, stop chasing, stop begging, and start flowing. You realize that everything meant for you will find its way, not through striving, but through surrender. This is the beauty of new sight. You no longer look for God in what happens. You see Him in everything that is. Every sunrise feels like His promise, every breath like His mercy, every step like His grace. And though you still walk by faith, now you walk with eyes that have seen enough to know. God's love has never stopped writing your story. It only waited for you to open your eyes and read what He's been writing all along. When purpose returns to the heart. After your eyes are opened, something stirs inside you. Quiet at first, like a faint rhythm beneath your ribs. You start waking up not just to live, but to be used. The peace that filled your soul begins to overflow, and suddenly you sense that this healing was never meant to end with you. God's love didn't rescue you so you could stay still. It restored you so you could become a vessel of hope for others. You begin to see how everything you've walked through has been preparation. The nights that broke you taught compassion. The silences that wounded you built wisdom. The losses that humbled you became the foundation of empathy. You realize your story, with all its cracks and questions, is not a record of failure, but a living testimony of grace. What once shamed you now carries anointing. What once silenced you now carries truth. Purpose is not always revealed in flashes of light. Sometimes it comes in small stirrings, a thought that won't leave, a pull toward someone else's pain, a voice inside whispering, "Go back and help them the way I helped you." That's how God's love works. It turns healed wounds into doors through which others can enter freedom. It takes your scars and makes them maps for those still lost in the dark. You don't need to have everything figured out to be useful. You just need to be available. God doesn't search for perfection. He looks for surrender. The same hands that once trembled in fear are now capable of carrying light. The same voice that once cried out in despair is now capable of speaking life. And the same heart that once begged for meaning now beats with divine purpose. To love, to lift, to lead others back to the one who saved you. You start to see that purpose is not always about doing more. It's about being more. Being present where love is needed. Being kind when the world grows cold. Being gentle when bitterness tempts you. Because God's love doesn't always send you to stages. Sometimes it sends you to the quiet corners of someone's sorrow, where your story becomes their reminder that healing is possible. Every experience, every ache, every delay. It was shaping you for this. For the moment you'd realize that your pain was never meaningless. It was a seed. And now, watered by tears and grown in faith, it's bearing fruit that others will taste and find hope in. So walk with purpose, but walk softly. You're carrying more than memories. You're carrying redemption. You're not the same person who once begged God for answers. You've become the answer to someone else's prayer. And as you move forward, you'll feel it. The rhythm of heaven inside you. Steady, certain, alive. That's the heartbeat of God's love, guiding your steps toward the purpose that has always been waiting for you. When your light begins to heal others, it happens quietly, not with applause, not with recognition. One day someone looks at you and says, "There's something different about you." And they're right. There is. You carry peace now. You carry the fragrance of survival wrapped in grace. What once was pain has become presence. What once broke you now shines through you. That's what happens when God's love finishes its work inside a soul. It turns wounded hearts into living beacons of hope. You no longer need to prove that you've changed. Your calm speaks louder than words. People feel it when you walk into a room. The softness, the strength, the light that doesn't demand attention but quietly fills the darkness. They sense something holy around you, though they may not have the words for it. It's not perfection they see. It's peace, it's faith. It's the reflection of a heart that has been touched by God. You start noticing others the way He noticed you. The silent ones, the weary, the ones pretending they're fine while breaking inside. And instead of judging their struggle, you understand it. Because you've been there. You know the language of pain. You recognize the look of someone who's holding on by a thread. And now, instead of offering quick answers, you offer presence. You offer listening. You offer love. That's how God's love flows. Not through sermons, but through souls who remember what it felt like to be found. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more light. Not the blinding kind that exposes, but the gentle kind that invites. You become that light. Through kindness, through patience, through compassion that costs you nothing but gives others everything. Sometimes the greatest ministry is simply sitting beside someone in silence, letting them know they're not alone. Your story becomes sacred ground. People don't need to know all the details. They just need to feel the truth in your tone, that you've walked through fire and still believe in goodness. Every time you speak peace over someone, heaven echoes it. Every time you forgive, the atmosphere shifts. Every time you choose love when anger would be easier, darkness loses a little of its hold. And in those moments you realize something profound. Your life itself has become a prayer. Not the kind spoken in words, but the kind lived through love. You are no longer just a recipient of grace. You are its vessel. You carry healing not because you were never broken, but because you let God's love heal you so deeply that your very being now reminds others that restoration is real. So don't be afraid to shine. Your light isn't arrogance, it's testimony. It's the evidence that grace works, that mercy wins, that faith still moves mountains. You are proof that even when everything collapses, God's love can rebuild a soul so radiant that it guides others home. And that, beloved, is the quiet miracle the world has been waiting for, you. When gratitude becomes your way of living, there comes a morning when you wake up and realize you are no longer surviving. You are living. The ache that used to echo in every breath is gone, replaced by a deep, steady gratitude that hums quietly inside your chest. You look around and see not perfection but purpose. Not everything is how you imagined, yet somehow it's more beautiful than you dared to dream. That's the quiet wonder of God's love. It takes ordinary days and turns them into evidence of His faithfulness. You begin to thank Him, not only for what worked out, but for what didn't. You thank Him for the prayers He answered with mercy and for the ones He answered with silence. You thank him for the doors that closed, for the people who left, for the nights that stretched longer than you thought you could endure. Because now you see, every one of them was grace in disguise. Every delay, every disappointment, every detour was shaping the person you were always meant to become. Gratitude changes everything. It takes your eyes off what you lack and opens them to what you already have. You start to notice how much beauty you once overlooked, the laughter that returns to your home, the warmth of sunlight on your face, the simple miracle of waking up and still believing. You understand that joy doesn't arrive when life becomes easy. It arrives when your heart chooses to see God in everything. You begin to live slower now. You don't rush through moments. You dwell in them. You listen when others speak. You breathe between words. You understand that every second is borrowed from eternity, and the only proper response is gratitude. Even pain, when remembered through healed eyes, becomes sacred. Because when you trace your scars, you see not wounds, but fingerprints, the mark of a love that refused to let you go. God's love has rewritten your language. Where you once said, "I don't understand," you now say, "I trust." Where you once asked, "Why me?" you now whisper, "Thank you, Lord, for choosing me to see your power." You start realizing that gratitude is not something you feel once in a while. It's who you are becoming. A person who lives aware that every breath, every kindness, every sunrise is a message from heaven saying, "I am still with you." This gratitude changes the way you see others too. You no longer envy. You celebrate. You no longer compare. You bless. You no longer fear the future. You walk into it with open hands, knowing that the same love that carried you this far will never stop. The storms taught you how to stand. The waiting taught you how to trust. But gratitude taught you how to see. And as you sit with this awareness, tears fill your eyes, not of sorrow, but of awe. You realize that everything you once begged God to take away was actually what led you here, to this moment of peace, purpose, and praise. And now, as your heart overflows, you can finally say with certainty, "I wouldn't change a thing." Because every step, even the painful ones, led me to understand the depth of God's love. When God's love writes the final chapter, there is a silence that comes at the end of the journey, not empty, but full. The kind of silence that feels like sunrise after years of walking through the night. You sit there breathing slowly, realizing that the story you once begged God to change has become the very proof of His mercy. You see now that every season, every tear, every unanswered prayer was a sentence in the masterpiece He was writing inside you. The pain didn't ruin you, it revealed you. It stripped away what was temporary and uncovered what was eternal. You no longer ask, "Why did it have to be this way?" You simply whisper, "Thank you," because you know now, nothing was wasted. The chapters that once made you weep have become the foundation of your wisdom. The endings you feared have become doorways to beginnings you never expected. Every wound has turned into worship. Every scar now shines with the light of lessons learned in the dark. God's love has been the author all along. You thought you were broken beyond repair, but He was rewriting you into something sacred. He turned your cries into prayers, your weakness into worship, your confusion into calling. And now, as you look back, you don't see chaos anymore. You see choreography. The kind only heaven could compose. There was never a single moment when you walked alone. When you fell, His arms caught you. When you doubted, His grace covered you. When you stopped believing, His faith in you remained. You realize now that the love of God isn't something you find at the end of your story. It is your story. Every line, every pause, every word written with care. And now, something inside you exhales. The fear is gone. The striving is gone. What remains is stillness, the kind that comes when a soul finally understands that everything is held together by love. You're not who you were when this began. You're gentler now, stronger, softer, wiser. You've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting the pain, It means remembering it without losing peace. You've learned that surrender isn't weakness. It's the truest form of trust. You can walk forward now, not because everything is clear, but because you know who walks beside you. The path ahead may twist, the sky may darken again, but you carry light now, not from what's around you, but from who lives within you. You are no longer afraid of what's next, because you've seen what God's love can do with what's broken. So close your eyes. Breathe deep. The story isn't over. It's just beginning again, this time with heaven's handwriting on every page. Let his love keep rewriting you again and again until all that remains of your old fears are the holy echoes of a God who never stopped believing in you. Because in the end, and in every new beginning, it was always God's love writing your story. And so, beloved soul, this is where the journey ends, not in loss, but in light. You have walked through silence, through shadow, through surrender, and you've emerged radiant with peace that only heaven can give. What once felt like fragments are now the foundation of faith. What once felt like endings are now eternal beginnings. Your story is no longer defined by pain. It's defined by the love that never let go. Lift your eyes. The same God who rebuilt your heart is still writing your future. Every step ahead will carry the fragrance of grace, every breath the sound of belonging. You are not who you were. You are who God's love has made you to be, whole, renewed, and free. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians 1:6. So walk forward now, gentle and brave, carrying the peace that passes understanding. Because your story, every line, every scar, every prayer, is living proof that when you can't see the solution, God's love is still rewriting your life with purpose, promise, and eternal hope.